For many years, Jim Caviezel chose not to talk about what really happened while filming The Passion of the Christ. People heard rumors. Some stories sounded unbelievable. Others were quietly dismissed. But now, for the first time, Jim is speaking openly about what he experienced. He describes moments so intense and so unusual that even today, no one can fully explain them. This is not just a story about making a movie. It is a story about pain, faith, fear, and experiences that went beyond what the eyes could see. Before we continue, please like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's look closely at what Jim Caviezel says still has no explanation. By the early 2000s, Jim Caviezel was finally gaining real momentum in Hollywood. The years of auditions, small roles, and near misses were beginning to pay off. He was no longer invisible. Doors were opening. His name was starting to circulate in rooms that mattered. And then came a phone call that would quietly place everything he had worked for on the line. Mel Gibson did not present the role lightly. According to Jim, the conversation was direct, almost unsettling in its honesty. Mel warned him that portraying Jesus Christ was not like taking on any other character. This role carried weight, not just creatively, but socially, professionally, and spiritually. In a film industry increasingly uncomfortable with explicit expressions of Christian faith, playing Jesus could come with consequences, real ones. Mel told him plainly that if he accepted the role, there was a strong chance Hollywood would turn its back on him. For Jim, that warning landed hard. He had just begun to experience success after years of struggle. Like any actor, he had ambitions, responsibilities, and a future he was trying to build. Walking away from that momentum felt reckless. For a moment, he hesitated. He later admitted that fear crept in. Not fear of the role itself, but fear of what it might cost him once the cameras stopped rolling. And yet, something unexpected followed. Jim describes a sudden, deep sense of peace that didn't come from reasoning through the risks. It wasn't the kind of calm that arrives after a careful calculation. It came uninvited, steady and overwhelming, cutting through the noise of doubt. In that moment, the decision stopped feeling like a career move and started feeling like a calling. His response to Mel became one of the most defining statements of his life. Jim told him, "We are all called to carry our crosses, and if we don't, we'll get crushed under the weight of it." It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't dramatic. It was a conclusion that felt settled, almost final. From that point forward, Jim no longer viewed the role of Jesus as something he was choosing for himself. He saw it as something he was stepping into, fully aware that it might demand more than he could predict. The warning wasn't ignored. It was accepted. And with that acceptance came the understanding that whatever followed, whether success or silence, would be part of the cost. This was not the beginning of a film shoot. It was the beginning of a path that would lead him far beyond acting, into experiences he says, even now, no one can fully explain. Once Jim Caviezel accepted the role, he quickly realized that ordinary preparation would not be enough. This was not a character he could study, imitate, and then step away from at the end of the day. From the beginning, Jim sensed that portraying Jesus demanded something deeper than technical skill or emotional range. It required a form of inner alignment, a kind of readiness that went far beyond memorizing lines or understanding motivation. Jim has said that he did not feel worthy to play Jesus Christ. In fact, that sense of unworthiness followed him constantly. Both he and Mel Gibson openly acknowledged that no one in Hollywood, an industry filled with broken people and complicated pasts, could ever truly be fit to portray someone so holy. That realization did not disqualify him in his mind. Instead, it humbled him. Jim came to believe that the point was not perfection, but obedience in spite of imperfection. As filming approached, Jim returned deeply to the Catholic faith of his upbringing. Practices he had once known became daily necessities. He carried his rosary with him at all times. He prayed constantly, not out of routine, but out of dependence. Each day he received the Eucharist. Each day he went to confession. These were not symbolic gestures. For Jim, they were forms of spiritual armor. He later explained that he felt the set of the Passion of the Christ was not neutral ground. There was a growing sense that the production itself was surrounded by resistance, tension, and unseen pressure. Whether others noticed it or not, Jim felt he was stepping into something contested. Preparation, therefore, was not optional. It was survival. During this time, Jim wrestled with fear. Not fear of physical pain, but fear of failing the responsibility he had accepted. He prayed not for comfort or success, but for the strength to endure whatever the role required. The more he prepared, the more he understood that this role would not protect him from suffering. If anything, it might invite it. What changed, however, was his perspective. Jim stopped asking whether the role would damage his career. That question faded into the background. The only thing that mattered was whether he would remain faithful to the calling he believed he had received. If this film became the last thing he ever did in Hollywood, he was willing to accept that outcome. By the time filming began, Jim Caviezel was no longer approaching the Passion of the Christ as an actor stepping onto a set. He was stepping into the role with the awareness that whatever happened next would shape him permanently. And he was preparing not just for a performance, but for a trial. When filming moved into the crucifixion sequences, the experience shifted into territory no one on set could fully control. These scenes were not filmed quickly or comfortably. They required long hours, repeated takes, and physical positions that placed unusual strain on the body. Jim was suspended for extended periods, often in harsh weather conditions, with little room for relief once a scene began. The environment itself became an unexpected factor. Temperatures dropped, winds intensified, and maintaining physical stability grew increasingly difficult. What was intended to look convincing on screen slowly became physically taxing in reality. Muscles stiffened, circulation was restricted. Over time, Jim began losing sensation in his hands, not from acting, but from prolonged pressure and exposure. This numbness was not dramatic or sudden. It crept in quietly, almost unnoticed at first, then became impossible to ignore. During these moments, Jim remained conscious of one thing above all else: staying mentally present. With limited movement and increasing discomfort, he focused inward. He later explained that he used prayer as a way to remain grounded, directing his attention away from the physical strain and toward meaning. This was not done for effect or storytelling. It was how he endured the hours without panic or distraction. Medical staff on set monitored the situation, but the seriousness of what was developing internally was not immediately visible. Outwardly, Jim continued performing. Inwardly, his body was under mounting stress. His breathing became more labored. Fatigue set in faster than expected. There were moments when his strength dipped suddenly, without warning, leaving him momentarily disoriented. What made this phase especially challenging was the repetition. These were not single takes followed by rest. Scenes were revisited, adjusted, and filmed again from multiple angles. Recovery time was limited. The physical toll accumulated gradually, stacking strain upon strain until it became clear that this was no longer a normal production environment. Despite this, Jim did not ask for the scenes to be softened or shortened. He remained committed to completing them as required, trusting the production team to intervene if necessary. Looking back, he has said that this period marked the point where he stopped distinguishing between acting and endurance. The body was no longer simply portraying suffering. It was being tested by circumstances that no script could fully anticipate. These crucifixion scenes would later be remembered not just for their impact on screen, but for the quiet, unseen cost they demanded behind the camera. And long after filming ended, Jim would discover that the effects of those days did not end when the set was cleared. The final stages of filming carried a strange sense of pressure, as if everything had narrowed toward a single moment. What was planned as a routine shoot unfolded in a way no one expected. Earlier that day, conditions appeared stable. The sky was clear. The schedule was set. There was nothing to suggest that anything unusual was about to interrupt the production. As the crew prepared for the shot, the atmosphere shifted quickly. Light changed. Wind picked up. What had been calm became unsettled in a matter of minutes. Those present would later recall how abrupt the transition felt. Not gradual, not predicted. It was as though the environment itself had turned without warning. Jim was already positioned for the scene when the change occurred. Movement was limited. Communication was reduced to signals and brief instructions. Then, without buildup, the moment arrived. A powerful electrical discharge struck nearby, creating instant confusion on set. Sound overwhelmed everything. Crew members reacted instinctively, unsure of what had just happened or who had been affected. Jim later described a disorienting sensation in the immediate aftermath. Time felt fractured. For a brief instant, his awareness separated from the intensity of the moment. He has said that his perception shifted, allowing him to observe what was happening from a perspective he could not explain logically. It was not a dreamlike state, nor was it something he had experienced before. Chaos followed quickly. Crew members rushed forward. Another electrical strike occurred in close proximity, injuring someone who had moved toward Jim. Sparks were visible. The set fell silent, except for urgent voices calling for medical attention. Filming stopped immediately. The focus turned from production to safety and recovery. Jim was treated on site and later given medication to manage shock. At the time, there was no clear explanation for why conditions had changed so fast or why the incident occurred exactly when it did. Investigations would follow, but no conclusion fully accounted for the timing or intensity of what happened. In the days that followed, the event lingered in the minds of everyone involved. For Jim, it became one of the moments he struggled most to articulate. It did not fit neatly into cause and effect thinking. It was not something he could dismiss as coincidence, yet it resisted simple interpretation. This was not just an interruption during filming. It was a turning point. From that day forward, Jim carried the awareness that something had occurred which stood outside ordinary experience. And even now, years later, when asked about it, he returns to the same conclusion. The facts are clear. The sequence is known. But what truly happened in that moment remains something no one has been able to fully explain. In the aftermath of that day, what stayed with Jim Caviezel was not only the incident itself, but a question he says did not fade with time. It was not spoken aloud, and it did not come from anyone on set. It surfaced internally, clear and unmistakable, cutting through the confusion of the moment. The question was simple, yet unsettling. Am I too close? Jim has explained that the question did not feel threatening or distant. It carried a tone of intimacy, almost like an invitation rather than a warning. Without hesitation, he responded inwardly, "You're not close enough." That exchange, brief as it was, became one of the most defining moments of his experience on the film. For Jim, the meaning of that question went far beyond the physical danger he had just faced. It forced him to confront a deeper understanding of faith and suffering. He began to see pain not as evidence of abandonment, but as proximity, not something to escape, but something that revealed how near one was willing to draw. This realization reshaped how he viewed the journey he was on. Jim became increasingly vocal about his concern with forms of faith that promise comfort without cost. He questioned the idea that belief should shield a person from hardship. In his view, such teachings distort the nature of commitment by removing the very thing that tests it. He spoke openly about the difference between gratitude and attachment. Enjoying life's blessings, he argued, is not the problem. The danger lies in refusing to let go of them if asked. Faith, to him, was no longer measured by what one gained, but by what one was willing to surrender. The question, "Am I too close?" became a mirror. It reflected not only his own limits, but the broader tendency to keep faith at a safe distance. Close enough to inspire, but not close enough to demand transformation. Jim believed that real belief collapses that distance entirely. Rather than hardening him, the experience softened his certainty about outcomes. He stopped expecting protection from difficulty. Instead, he learned to expect purpose within it. Whatever lay ahead, whether understood or not, he felt prepared to meet it without retreat. Years later, when Jim reflects on that moment, he does not attempt to define it or label it. He simply returns to the question itself. Because for him, the power of that moment was not in the answer, but in the willingness to stay close, even when closeness came at a cost. Long after filming ended, the physical consequences of the Passion of the Christ did not fade quietly into memory. What Jim Caviezel carried away from the production was not only emotional weight, but damage that revealed itself gradually, over years rather than days. Fatigue lingered. His strength fluctuated. Eventually, doctors confirmed that his heart had been affected in ways that required serious medical intervention. Surgery was not unexpected, but it was still sobering. Jim approached it with the same calm resolve that had guided him through filming. He trusted the doctors. He prepared himself mentally. There was no sense that what followed would become one of the most defining moments of his life. During one of these procedures, something went wrong. Jim has described the moment with striking clarity. Without warning, his awareness shifted. Breathing was no longer necessary. Pain disappeared. The physical boundaries he had always known were suddenly absent. He realized he was no longer experiencing the world from inside his body. From that detached vantage point, he could see the operating room below him. He recognized the doctors. He watched their movements become urgent. Their calm professionalism gave way to alarm. He saw fear on their faces, not for themselves, but for him. It was only then that he understood what had happened. His heart had stopped. What surprised him most was not the separation itself, but the absence of distress. There was no struggle, no sense of panic, no urge to resist. Instead, Jim describes an overwhelming calm, accompanied by a sense of clarity and peace unlike anything he had experienced before. Time did not behave normally. Moments stretched, yet felt complete. He later explained that the return was the hardest part. When his awareness was drawn back into his body, sensation returned abruptly. pain followed. The contrast was unmistakable. Whatever he had experienced outside his body felt gentle in comparison. Doctors later confirmed what Jim already knew. His heart had stopped, and he had been brought back. Medically, it was classified and recorded. Personally, it left him with questions that no diagnosis could answer. This experience altered his understanding of fear. The fear of death, he realized, belonged to the body, not the soul. The body resisted. The soul did not. That distinction stayed with him, reshaping how he thought about mortality, suffering, and preparation. Jim does not present this moment as proof of anything, nor does he attempt to define it with certainty. He simply recounts it as it happened, aware that language falls short. What occurred in that operating room became another chapter in a series of events he never sought, yet could not ignore. And once again, he returned to the same conclusion he had reached before. The facts were witnessed. The records exist. But the meaning of what happened in that moment remains beyond explanation. Recovery was slow, and at times isolating. Jim Caviezel spent long periods confined to bed, his body struggling to regulate itself. Despite layers of clothing and a heated room, uncontrollable shaking set in. His strength was depleted. Simple movements caused strain. It was during one of these vulnerable moments, when his defenses were at their lowest, that an experience occurred which he has described with careful restraint and lasting seriousness. Jim recalls becoming aware of a presence beside his bed. There was no surge of fear, no confusion, and no sense of threat. The moment felt calm, focused, and unmistakably real to him. He later explained that he did not question what he was seeing or rush to interpret it. His attention was drawn instead to the emotion he perceived. The figure was weeping. According to Jim, his first response was concern, not surprise. He describes asking why there was sorrow. In response, his attention was directed downward. On the floor, he saw a spread of playing cards. They were not ordinary decks. There were no numbered cards, only face cards. Kings, queens, jacks. Their faces appeared distorted, stripped of warmth, resembling masks rather than expressions. Jim understood the scene as symbolic, not theatrical. The cards, as he interpreted them, represented people entrusted with significant gifts over time: talent, influence, opportunity. The pattern, he sensed, was gradual and subtle. At first, devotion was divided, then slowly redirected. What began as balance shifted towards self-interest until nothing remained except self. What unsettled him most was the familiarity of the warning. It did not accuse. It did not condemn. It cautioned. The message was not about fame or success alone, but about direction, about how easily focus can drift without being noticed. Jim has said that the experience left him with a lasting resolve. He did not want attention drawn to himself. He did not want to be elevated by association with what he had portrayed. His desire was clear. If people were going to see anything through his work or his story, he wanted it to point beyond him. He has never framed this moment as something meant to impress or persuade. In fact, he spoke about it publicly only after many years of silence. For him, it remains a personal warning, one that continues to shape his choices. Even now, when Jim reflects on everything that surrounded the Passion of the Christ, this moment stands apart. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was quiet, and because it reminded him that the greatest danger does not always come through loss or suffering, but through gradual misdirection that goes unnoticed until it is too late. For many years, Jim Caviezel chose not to speak publicly about these experiences. not because they faded, and not because they lost their weight, but because he understood how easily they could be misunderstood. In an age that demands quick explanations and neat conclusions, what he lived through resisted both. Silence, for a long time, felt more honest than simplification. When Jim finally began to speak, he did so carefully. He did not present theories. He did not offer conclusions. He simply described what happened, as clearly and as truthfully as he could. A role that came with a warning, a body pushed beyond expected limits, a moment when nature itself seemed to shift without notice, a question that lingered long after the danger passed, a medical event witnessed by professionals, yet experienced in a way that defied medical language, and a warning that remained personal, quiet, and unresolved. What connects all of these moments is not spectacle, but consistency. Again and again, Jim found himself in situations where cause and effect no longer lined up neatly. There were witnesses, there were records, there were people who saw the same events from different angles. And yet, when all the facts were laid out, something essential remained out of reach. That is why, even now, he returns to the same phrase. To this day, no one can explain it. The impact of The Passion of the Christ did not end when the film left theaters. It altered the direction of Jim's life in ways he did not anticipate. Some opportunities disappeared. Certain paths quietly closed. But what remained was a clarity he says he did not possess before. A clarity about cost, about purpose, about the difference between success and meaning. Jim has never claimed that suffering made him stronger in the way slogans suggest. Instead, he speaks of it as something that stripped away illusions. It removed the expectation that faith exists to prevent hardship. What it revealed instead was a form of preparation. Preparation not for comfort, but for endurance. Not for certainty, but for trust. When he speaks about death now, his tone is noticeably calm. He does not rush past it or soften it with language. He simply acknowledges that the fear surrounding it belongs largely to the physical body. What he experienced showed him that beyond that fear, there is an order the body cannot perceive. Whether others believe it or not, that understanding changed him permanently. Jim does not ask his audience to accept his experiences as proof of anything. He does not insist on interpretation. He leaves space for doubt, for questions, and for disagreement. All he offers is testimony. This is what happened. This is how it affected him. And this is why, after years of silence, he finally chose to speak. Perhaps that is why his story continues to resonate. Not because it answers everything, but because it refuses to force an answer. It acknowledges mystery without exploiting it. And in doing so, it leaves the listener with a choice: to dismiss it, to reflect on it, or to sit with the discomfort of not knowing. If this story made you pause, if it raised questions you didn't expect, take a moment to let us know in the comments. Your perspective matters. And if you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for staying with us through a story that, even now, remains unexplained.
Compiling the research for this video was a disturbing experience. We often dismiss on-set accidents as bad luck, but the sheer volume of trauma Jim Caviezel endured from lightning strike to open-heart surgery feel less like misfortune and more like spiritual retaliation. It's hard to shake the feeling that he wasn't just memorizing lines, he was stepping onto a battlefield. This story forces you to confront the reality that some truth demand a physical price. We don't shy away from that darkness here. We walk right into it. If you're looking for a channel that values depth over comfort and isn't afraid of unexplainable, hit that subscribe button. Let's keep exploring the things most are too afraid to touch.